Hi, that's Aaron.
And that's Keith.
And this is Destination Whiskey
at IronRoot Republic.
All right, we're here at IronRoot Republic Distillery. And today we have with us
Robert Likarish. I'm one of the owners and distillers here at IronRoot. Welcome to Denison, Texas, guys.
Outstanding. Thank you. Thank you.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your process here?
So yeah, if you guys follow me in, we'll start from kind of the very beginning. So for us, primarily we make bourbon here. We make a few other kind of fun things on the side because if you own a distillery, you get a little ADD sometimes, want to do some fun things. We'll talk about the bourbon process today.
Okay.
So obviously with bourbon, we're going to be starting out with the recipe that we're using to make the whiskey.
Okay.
Which by law, bourbon has to be 51% corn. The other 49% can be anything that your heart desires.
Okay.
But when you were looking at that primary corn that we're doing here, so we're going to use a regular number 2 yellow dent corn. It's a non-GMO that grows here locally. But other than that yellow corn, which is going to make up about 60% of our mash bill, we're going to be using different types of corn as flavoring corn. So
okay.
when you look over here, so instead of using wheat or rye, like a lot of times they do in Kentucky, we're going to be using, most of the time, one of these different corns. This corn right here is called Bloody Butcher corn. It's a red corn that originated in the late 1700s. We actually get it grown down in Munster, Texas, not too far from here. The next one we do is actually a purple corn called Chicha Morado. It's actually from Peru originally, and its ancestor was an Incan corn varietal, but really cool corn. The entire corn, like not only is the corn purple, but the plant is purple. It's very pretty to be grown. Fun fact about it, it's also technically a superfood. It actually has a higher concentration of antioxidants in it than most green teas do.
Wow.
So now, by the time we're done with it, you don't get the benefits of that, unfortunately. There's no such thing as healthy whiskey, guys, but those things do transform some really cool flavors.
Don't listen to him. I don't think he knows what he's talking about. There's lots of healthy whiskeys.
And the last of kind of the core heirlooms that we're going to use here is this really cool guy right here called Floriani. It's a flint corn. It's kind of got some cool sweetness, really cool earthiness, depending on where it's growing, whether it's closer to the Red River or a little bit farther away. But also what's really fun about Floriani, it's actually a spicy corn. So when it comes off the still, you get this beautiful sweetness, you get those earthier tones, but then it's like you dust it with cayenne peppers. So we actually will use this corn as a substitute for rye in a lot of the mash bills that we do here.
I was going to ask that question.
Yeah, so it's a really fun one now. As I mentioned, we're a little ADD here. We've explored a lot of different corns over the years. We've actually distilled over 65 different species of corn. And every year we test out 2 or 3 new ones just to see what there is out there, because you never know what flavors you're going to find. Now, once we've kind of decided which corn we're going to use, depending on kind of what flavors we want in the whiskey, we're then going to start the mashing process. So what we're going to do is we're going to grind our corn up into almost like a flour-like consistency. It's right between flour and grits. Then we'll take 1,300 pounds of corn, and we're going to stick it in this big tank over here to our left. So in this tank, we will dump through that manhole that 1,300 pounds of corn in here. Inside, we're going to have water that we've already warmed up, about 400 gallons of water. Once we dump the corn in, though, we're going to start mixing the tank using what we call an agitator. It's this big kind of giant stir stick on the side of the tank. It's got like a boat propeller at the bottom of it. So we're going to turn that on, and it starts mixing everything up and creates like a giant corn slurry is the best way to describe it. Once we've got it all mixed up, though, then we're going to crank the steam all the way up. So you can hear the steam kind of running right now as it's starting to warm water. But we're going to take that and crank it all the way up to as high as it goes, because we're going to drive that mixture of corn and water all the way up to 212 degrees. Now, the reason why we're bringing it up to that high of a temperature is corn actually has the highest gelatinization temperature for its sugars out of any grain. So you have to cook corn at a higher temperature than other grains. So that's why we're going to cook corn first. So we're going to cook it, bring it all the way up. We're going to hold it at that temperature for about 1 hour. And then we're going to start crash cooling the tank using a cold water jacket on the outside of it. Once we start cooling it, we're going to drop it all the way down to 150 to 160 degrees. Once we get within that range, if we are gonna do a mash bill that has something other than corn in it, which only about a third of the mash bills we do here use grain other than corn. But if we are gonna use any wheat or barley or rye or oats or some other crazy thing my brother's come up with that week, we would add it in at that point and hold it at that temperature for 1 hour so those grains get cooked as well.
Okay.
But once everything's been cooked, we will crash cool it all the way down to room temp, at which point we're gonna add in our yeast and then pump it to one of the 4 fermenters sitting here behind us. So these are brand new fermenters. They came in just a couple of months ago. Once we get the all the stuff in there and we allow fermentation to start, we're gonna leave them in there for 7 days.
Okay.
And over the course of that 7 days, that yeast is gonna eat all those sugars and carbohydrates and convert them over to alcohol, into CO2, into esters and precursors to esters. So you can actually see the little black line that kind of leads out of the building. That's where we're drawing all the CO2 out. We use closed top fermentation here because we're doing mashing in the same room where we do fermentation. And if we didn't, you'd get raw grain dust into the fermenter, which you don't want to do. But once we got that yeast rocking and rolling, it's actually going to drive the alcohol content inside the fermenter all the way up to 12% alcohol, which is the strength of like a super strong beer or a weaker wine, to kind of put that in perspective.
Okay.
Now, once you've gotten to this point, you've used all of the sugars and carbohydrates. So the best way to describe what it kind of tastes like at this point is if you took like a Budweiser, not like a Bud Light, but like a Budweiser, and you left it out in the summer sun for about 3 days, and then you're like, oh, I left my beer outside, ran out there, grabbed that bad boy, brought it back in, cracked it open, poured it on top of a piece of cornbread, and then tried to eat the piece of cornbread. It's gonna be chunky, it's gonna be a little funky, but there is alcohol in there and it will do the job if you really want it to. We just don't highly suggest you do it that way. So
I'll never get that vision out of my mind.
So after we finished up that fermentation, we're gonna take one of these fermenters and we're gonna pump it in this big still over here behind us. So
Pot still.
yes, sir. This is a traditional Scottish style pot still.
Okay. And so what made you decide on that? Because I assume that there are other types of stills to use.
Oh yeah, there's many. So pot stills actually, I would say the rarer type to use within the United States.
That's what I've heard.
The reason why we chose to use this style still has to come from like the training my brother and I had. So my brother and I were actually trained by a master cognac distiller named Hubert Germain Raban. And in cognac, they use versions of a pot still that they call the alembic stills. So instead of that super tall, long neck off the top, they have these elegant little swan necks. Now, the reason why we went through and decided to do that rather than using the continuous column they use in Kentucky is because for us, especially with our 100% in-house whiskey that we sell, we want to really showcase those heirloom corns to the maximum amount. Okay. And this style still, the way that it operates, it's actually going to concentrate down whatever base flavors you put in there. It's why, by law, in order to make single malt in Scotland, you have to use a pot still, because the pot stills will maintain a lot more of those barley flavors.
Okay.
Same thing with cognac in France. It's going to maintain a lot more of the grape flavors, and for us, we're wanting to maintain a lot more of those different corns so that you can really see why each of those corns is really important to that final flavor of the whiskey.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate that.
yeah, no problem.
So you mentioned cognac, and we noticed when we were here Friday doing the walkthrough that that's the sister city to Denison.
It is.
And that also has something to do with the name of this place too, right? Isn't that all related?
Oh yeah. So the history of Denison and cognac goes back, well over 150 years, and it has to do with a famous viticulturist that actually lived here in the city of Denison, named T.V. Munson. And his research, he actually discovered a way to graft French grapes on top of Texas grape roots, which started allowing us here in North America to grow a lot of the different French varietals of grapes here.
Okay.
So why California is famous for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, Merlot, a lot stems from the kind of the research that T.V. Munson did here. But the reason why the Texas grape roots are so important is because they're really highly resistant to disease and bugs here from North America. And so in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when we accidentally started shipping a bunch of those bugs over to Europe, Europe got infested, especially with this little aphid that carried this disease called phylloxera.
Okay.
And in less than a decade, when that got over to France, it wiped out close to 80% of the French grapes. You're talking Bordeaux, Burgundy, Cognac, Champagne, all were hit really hard by phylloxera. And TV Munson's research with these Texas grapes, they started actually sending these Texas grape roots over to France for them to graft their grapes on top of to start being able to grow their grapes again. And so because they're able to basically save the French wine industry with this, Denison and Cognac became sister cities. TV Munson was named to the French Legion of Honor. And the folks from Cognac, they started calling the grape roots the iron roots from Texas. So that's actually where the name of the distillery comes from. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, no problem. So for us, when we're using a pot still, typically we're going to use a traditional double distillation methodology, which simply means we're going to distill things 2 times. The first distillation, our goal is just to get the alcohol out of the alcoholic corn chowder that we've created. And then the second distillation, we're really going to refine the alcohol and get to the beverage alcohol that we're looking for. So how this operates is pretty simple. Once we've pumped everything in there, we're going to shut down that lid. And then on the back of the still here, you can see these giant wheels with the chains. That's the steam control for the still. So we're just going to open those valves all the way up, and that's going to allow high pressure, high temperature steam to flow into the still. And inside the still, there's actually a very large copper coil that steam's going to flow through. And as it does that, it's going to start radiating heat into everything else in the still, and everything's going to start warming up. And that's where you get to the basic science of distillation, which is alcohol has a lower boiling point than water. So as everything heats up, what happens is that alcohol turns into a vapor. It rises to the very top of the still here, and then gets funneled in this big cylinder here to our left. That's what's called a shell and tube condenser. So inside of that cylinder, there's a bunch of hollow copper poles that hot vapor is going to get forced into. On the outside of those copper poles, we run really cold water to keep the copper chilled down. That way, when the hot vapor enters, it causes the vapor to cool down, and when you cool down vapor, it turns it back into a liquid. So it's going to come out the other side as a clear liquid that we'll capture in a big tank that will sit here in front of the still. Now, the very first distillation run we're going to do is going to take about 14 hours to complete. And we're going to collect everything from when it first starts coming off the still till what we're reading coming off the still is less than 1% alcohol. We want to make sure we run it that low because we know that once we've run it that low, what's left inside the still is about 0.01% alcohol. And we need it that low because we're going to give everything that's left over in the still to local ranchers for their cows and their pigs. What we're saying is, so once we've run this first run, we have basically almost no alcohol left inside the still, and we need it that low because we're actually going to feed that to local cows and pigs. And they absolutely love this stuff. It's really funny to see it being, the cows, when they see the tank come out in the field, they will turn and start chasing it because they absolutely love this stuff. Works out really great because we've used up all the sugars and all the, obviously all the alcohol. So it's basically like a giant protein shake for cows. So it's really, really cool. And it's a great relationship because when the ranchers, they take it, it means we have zero waste here at the distillery and they get free feed. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody. Once we've pumped it out, what we'll do is we'll wash out the inside of the still and make sure there's nothing kind of encrusted in there at all. And then what we will do is we'll take what we just distilled, we'll stick it right back in the still and start the second distillation. And on the second distillation, we're going to crank that steam all the way up again. But once it hits about 150 degrees internally, we're going to take that steam and turn it almost all the way off. We want it just barely on now. And the reason for that is now we're not just trying to separate alcohol and water from each other, whose boiling points are really far apart. We're actually trying to separate out different types of alcohol from each other. And their boiling points are much closer together. So the only way to get it to really effectively separate when you're using a pot still is just by slowly heating it. So the very first stuff that will flow off the still is what we call heads. Stuff like methanol, ethyl acetate, the stuff in nail polish remover, all that will come off first, which hopefully none of that sounds too appetizing because that's all the really poisonous stuff. You ever heard stories of moonshine causing people to go blind? Methanol causes that. So yeah, if you leave here today, don't remember anything else that I've said, just remember this, don't drink methanol. That's really the moral of the story. So we'll collect that in a tank back behind the still here, and we're gonna let the still continue to run. And as it continues to run, what will start coming off next is gonna be what we call the heart section. That's where the ethanol is, that's where the beverage alcohol is, that's what we're really looking for. On this particular still, that'll last about 4 to 4.5 hours before ultimately you start fading into the tails section.
Okay.
Now the tails section, this is where the esters, precursor to esters, fusel oils, fusel alcohols, and phenols will all start coming off the still. Now, as a distiller, when we choose what to keep and what not to keep from this section, this is kind of where the art and the science of distilling, where they really kind of come together. Okay. Because different compounds that come off in the tails will actually create some of the more complex flavors of the whiskey. While your fruitier flavors, if you've ever had bourbon that's got like cherry notes, or any single malts that have like green apple or different kind of tropical fruit, all is going to come from the esters. Now, you can also do some really kind of crazy flavors in here. If you go really deep, you can get flavors like you'll see in like Jamaican rums and stuff like that, where it gets really estery. So you have to look at how much of those flavors do you want in that whiskey at the end of the day. So that's going to be one determination of how deep into the tails we go. But the other part is also knowing how long we actually have to age the whiskey. And the reason why is because all those esters and stuff I was mentioning right there, in order for them to become something that's really drinkable and something that we want to drink, a lot of times it takes years for those things to break down. And the more of them you have, the more time it's going to take for them all to properly break down and reform the stuff that we want to drink. So as a distiller, if I only got 2 years, I really can't go deep into tails at all. If I got 4 years, I can go a little bit deeper. 8 years, 12 years, 20 years, it's all going to determine what's kind of that deepest point I can really go off the still. So once we finish up running that second run, it's going to be about 140 proof at that point, which is too strong to go directly into barrel. So what we're going to do is then we're going to water it down based on the mash bill, somewhere between 115 and 120 proof.
Okay.
But once we've got it watered down, then we're going to actually take it to the back and actually start putting it in the barrels. So if you want to follow me to the back, we'll go.
Real quick question about that, though. Where do you source your water from?
That is a great question. So all the water for us here at IronRoot actually comes from Lake Randall, which is a lake that's just here locally. So it's all surface water that we're going to be using. Now, that water is going to go to the city, to the water treatment plant, and then it's going to come into our building. And once it enters our building, we're actually going to soften and carbon filter the water. Then from there, we actually test it kind of on a daily, weekly basis, because when you use surface water, the quality of what's going on in the water will change, or the minerality of the water will actually change, because during the summer you have a lot more evaporation out of the lake, so you're actually going to concentrate down and have a lot more TDS, a lot more salts and stuff actually in the water, which for us is really, we have a really interesting area, because up north here where you have all the lakes and everything with Lake Texoma, it's all limestone around the lakes, because it's actually an ancient seabed here. So even the soil tends to be a little more, has a little bit more salinity to it. So we get a lot of higher salts, a lot of higher TDS in here, which is actually really great for fermentation. When you have a lot of minerality, especially from like limestone, that's really advantageous on the kind of the first part of the process, because it adds a lot of nutrient for yeast to be able to kind of do what it does. Now, after distillation, though, our water is very different. After we finish up distillation, the only water we're going to be using at that point is going to be RO water, which is water that's gone through reverse osmosis, which makes the water 99.99% pure water. Because after we go through distillation, we don't want to add any off flavors or anything to the whiskey, so we need to make sure it's as pure as possible.